The Last Shift, closing at Video World, a 4-hour story part 1. The evening begins, 9 p.m. The overhead fluorescents hummed their familiar electric song as I flipped the sign on the glass door from open to closed. Through the smudged window, I could see the last few cars pulling out of the strip mall parking lot, their taillights cutting red streaks through the October drizzle. It was a Thursday night, which meant I had the closing shift alone. Kevin, my manager, had left at 8:30 with a stack of rental returns tucked under his arm and a reminder to check the drop box one last time before I locked up. Video World occupied the corner unit of the Riverside Plaza, sandwiched between a Subway that always smelled like bread yeast and a vacant storefront that used to be a Radio Shack. The carpet beneath my feet was that particular shade of purple and teal that seemed to exist only in the 1990s, worn thin in paths between the new releases wall and the checkout counter. Thousands of feet had walked these same routes, hunting for the perfect Friday night movie or hoping we still had a copy of whatever blockbuster had just hit VHS. I stood there for a moment, my hand still on the door's deadbolt, listening to the store settle into its nighttime rhythm. The VCR playing on the wall-mounted TV cycled through our promotional loop, trailers for upcoming releases, a reminder about our 5-day rental policy, an ad for our frequent renter program that would get you a free rental after every 10th movie. The blue glow from the television washed over the cardboard standees of Jim Carrey from The Mask and the dinosaurs from Jurassic Park that we'd never quite gotten around to taking down. My sneakers squeaked against the linoleum as I made my way back to the counter. The register drawer was already counted and secured in the safe in Kevin's office, which meant most of my closing duties would be straightforward: rewind the returns, reshelve everything in the drop box and on the rewind rack, vacuum the floors, and make sure every single movie was in its proper place on the shelves. On a good night, I'd be out of here by 11. On a bad night, well, I tried not to think about those. The phone behind the counter rang, its shrill bell cutting through the ambient store noise. I reached over the scarred Formica countertop and picked up the receiver, stretching the coiled cord as I wedged it between my ear and shoulder. Video World, this is closing in 10 minutes. How can I help you? Static crackled on the other end, followed by silence. I could hear something in the background, maybe breathing, maybe just the hiss of a bad connection. Hello? I tried again, already mentally rolling my eyes. Prank calls weren't uncommon, especially on weeknight closing shifts when bored teenagers had nothing better to do. The line went dead. I shrugged and hung up the phone, turning my attention to the stack of VHS tapes piled haphazardly in the return bin behind the counter. The first tape I grabbed was The Lion King. The clamshell case was sticky with what I hoped was spilled soda, and someone had neglected to rewind it. I sighed and walked it over to our bank of rewinders, 8 mechanical units that sat on a shelf beneath the checkout counter, each one humming and whirring as it spun the magnetic tape back to the beginning. The rewinders were arguably the most important piece of equipment in the store, aside from the cash register itself. People were supposed to be kind, rewind, as the stickers on every rental case reminded them, but at least a third of our returns came back without being rewound. It was my job to fix that before the tapes went back on the shelf. I loaded The Lion King into rewinder number 3 and pressed the button. The machine groaned to life, its mechanical gears engaging with a satisfying click. I grabbed another tape from the bin, Speed this time, one of our most rented action flicks. Also not rewound. Into rewinder number 5 it went. One by one, I worked through the stack, sorting the tapes into categories as I went. New releases would go on the wall behind the counter, visible from anywhere in the store. Action/adventure would go on the shelves along the right wall. Comedy and drama took up the center aisles. Horror, my personal favorite section, lurked in the back corner, its shelves decorated with fake cobwebs left over from last year's Halloween promotion. The work was meditative in its repetition. Grab a tape, check if it's rewound, load it into a rewinder if needed, sort it into the appropriate cart for reshelving. My hands moved on autopilot, leaving my mind free to wander. I thought about my classes. I was taking a full load at the community college, trying to get my Gen Eds done before transferring to a 4-year school. I thought about the paper I needed to finish for English Comp. I thought about Sarah, who worked the afternoon shifts on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and had smiled at me last week when I'd made a joke about late fees. The phone rang again. This time, when I answered, there was definitely someone on the other end. I could hear them breathing, slow and deliberate, like they were thinking carefully about what to say. Video World, I repeated, a little more firmly this time. We're closed. If you need to know our hours, we open at 10 tomorrow morning. I know what time you close, a voice said. Mail, probably. The connection was muffled, like they were calling from a payphone or covering the receiver with their hand. I'm watching. My stomach tightened, a cold finger of unease tracing down my spine. Excuse me? Click. Dial tone. I stood there for a moment, receiver in hand, staring at the phone like it might offer some explanation. Then I carefully hung it up and walked to the front windows, peering out into the parking lot. The rain had picked up, coming down in sheets now, blurring the streetlights into orange halos. The parking lot was empty except for my car, a beat-up Honda Civic that was more rust than paint, and a dark sedan parked at the far end of the lot, near the dumpsters. I couldn't see anyone inside the sedan. It might have been empty. It might have belonged to someone at the subway. It might have been nothing. Still, my heart was beating a little faster as I turned away from the window. I told myself it was just a prank. Some kid trying to spook the closing clerk. It happens sometimes, especially around Halloween. Nothing to worry about. I had work to do. The rewinders had finished their cycles, their machines falling silent one by one. I ejected each tape and began the process of matching them to their cases, a task that required more attention than you'd think. People were always shoving the wrong tape into the wrong case, or worse, losing cases entirely and forcing us to use generic replacements. I'd learned early on to always check that the label on the tape matched the label on the case before putting anything back on the shelf. The Lion King matched. Speed matched. Forrest Gump matched. Pulp Fiction wait. I turned the Pulp Fiction case over in my hands, frowning. The case was definitely ours, with the Video World sticker on the spine and our inventory number written in Sharpie on the back. But the tape inside was blank, unmarked except for a strip of masking tape on the side with something written on it in ballpoint pen. I held it up to the light, squinting at the cramped handwriting. Watch me, it said. A prickle of unease ran through me again, stronger this time. This wasn't normal. This wasn't a prank call or a creepy sedan in the parking lot. This was something inside the store, something someone had deliberately put in our return bin. I should have just set it aside. I should have put it in the damaged/questionable box that we kept behind the counter for tapes that needed Kevin's attention. But curiosity got the better of me, the way it always does in these situations. I walked over to the TV/VCR combo unit we kept behind the counter for checking return tapes and slid the unmarked cassette into the slot. The screen went black as the tape began to play. Then, slowly, an image resolved out of the static, grainy, washed-out footage that looked like it had been recorded on someone's home camcorder. The angle was low and fixed, like the camera had been set up on a tripod or a shelf. It showed the interior of a room. At first, I thought it might be someone's basement: concrete floor, exposed pipes running along the ceiling, cardboard boxes stacked against one wall. But as my eyes adjusted to the poor quality of the footage, I realized I was looking at something else. A video store. Not Video World, but somewhere similar. The familiar rows of shelves, the new releases wall, the checkout counter. The camera was positioned near the back of the store, pointing toward the front entrance. The store was empty, just like mine was now. The lights were on, the TV behind the counter playing something I couldn't make out from this angle. Everything looked normal, peaceful even. Then a figure walked into frame. They moved slowly, methodically, down the center aisle. From this distance and with the poor video quality, I couldn't make out much detail, just a silhouette, really, wearing what looked like a dark jacket or hoodie. They stopped in front of the horror section, reached up, and pulled something off the shelf. I leaned closer to the screen, trying to see what they'd grabbed, but the resolution was too poor. The figure stood there for what felt like a full minute, holding whatever tape they'd selected, their head tilted down as if reading the back of the case. Then, suddenly, they looked up. Directly at the camera. Directly at me. Even through the grainy footage and poor lighting, I could feel the weight of that stare. My breath caught in my throat. The figure raised one hand and seemed to wave, a slow, deliberate gesture. Then the screen went black. I stood there, frozen, my hand hovering over the VCR's eject button. What the hell had I just watched? Was this from another video store? When had it been filmed? And more importantly, why had someone put this tape in our return bin? The phone rang again. This time, I didn't want to answer it. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to ignore it, to let it ring itself out, to pretend I hadn't just watched that unsettling footage. But my hand was already reaching for the receiver, muscle memory overriding common sense. Video World, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Did you watch it? The same muffled voice from before, but now there was something else in it, anticipation, maybe, or excitement. Who is this? Did you watch the tape? My eyes darted to the front windows, to the dark sedan still sitting at the far end of the parking lot. I'm calling the police. You won't, the voice said confidently. You're curious. You want to know what happens next. What happens next? I repeated, my hand gripping the phone cord so tightly my knuckles went white. Check the drop box, they said. There's another one. The line went dead. I set the phone down carefully, my mind racing. This was insane. This was some kind of elaborate prank, it had to be. Maybe Kevin had set this up, some kind of hazing ritual for employees who'd been working here long enough. Maybe it was former employees messing with me. Maybe. The drop box. The external return slot where customers could leave their rentals after hours. It was built into the wall next to the front door, accessible from both inside and outside the store. I'd already emptied it once tonight, before Kevin left, but it was possible someone had dropped something off since then. Every rational part of my brain told me not to check, to lock the doors, turn off the lights, and go home, to call Kevin or the police or both. But curiosity, that same damned curiosity that had made me play the first tape, pulled me toward the front of the store. The drop box slot gaped open like a mouth when I lifted the interior panel. Inside, sitting alone in the metal tray, was another VHS tape in a black clamshell case. No label. No inventory number. Just a strip of masking tape on the spine that read Part 2. Part 2, the second tape, 9:45 p.m. I lifted the unmarked tape from the drop box with trembling fingers, holding it at arm's length like it might explode. The black clamshell case was generic, the kind you could buy in bulk from any electronics store, with none of the distinctive wear and tear that marked our rental inventory. Someone had placed this here recently, after Kevin left, after I'd already checked the drop box the first time. Which meant someone had been here, at the store, within the last hour. Maybe they were still here. I spun around, scanning the empty aisles behind me. The cardboard standees cast long shadows in the fluorescent light. The promotional TV flickered through its loop, bathing everything in shifting blue-white light. Nothing moved. Nothing except my own reflection in the darkened windows, looking pale and spooked. The phone sat silent on the counter, waiting. I should have left right then. Looking back now, I can see that moment clearly, the pivot point where I could have walked away, locked the door behind me, driven home, and let whatever weird game this was play out without me. But I was 22 years old and working the closing shift at a video store, and the most exciting thing that had happened to me all week was finding a rental copy of Clerks that someone had returned 3 months late. This was strange and unsettling and probably stupid, but it was also something different. I carried the tape back to the counter and ejected the first one from the VCR. The TV screen filled with static for a moment before I slid Part 2 into the slot and pressed play. The same camera angle. The same video store interior, empty and quiet. The timestamp in the corner of the screen showed a date from 2 months ago, August 15, 1996, and a time, 9:47 p.m. Almost exactly the same time it was right now. For the first 30 seconds, nothing happened. Just the static image of an empty store, the same one from the first tape. I was starting to wonder if someone had just recorded dead air when movement caught my eye. A door, the one leading to the back office, I realized, swung open. The same figure from before emerged, still wearing the dark hoodie, still moving with that same deliberate slowness. But this time they were carrying something. A cart, the kind we used for reshelving returns. I watched as they pushed the cart down the center aisle, stopping periodically to pull tapes from the shelves and load them into the cart. They moved with purpose, like they knew exactly which movies they wanted. After a few minutes of this, they pushed the full cart toward the camera. As they got closer, I found myself leaning toward the screen, trying to make out any identifying details. But the camera angle was all wrong, positioned too high and at the wrong angle to show their face clearly. Just the hood, pulled low, and the suggestion of features beneath. They stopped directly in front of the camera and looked up again. Even through the poor video quality, I could see their lips moving. They were saying something, but there was no audio on the tape, or maybe the camera hadn't recorded sound at all. The figure reached into their hoodie pocket and pulled out something small. They held it up to the camera, and after a moment I realized what it was, a photograph. But I couldn't make out what the photograph showed. The resolution was too poor, the image too small. Then they turned and walked out of frame, pushing the cart with them. The tape continued for another minute or so, showing nothing but the empty store, before cutting to black. I ejected the tape and stood there, my mind churning through possibilities. This had to be footage from another video store, somewhere else. The layout was similar to Video World, but lots of video stores looked alike in the 90s, same shelves, same setup, same promotional materials from the distributors. But why film it? Why leave it in our Dropbox? And why? The phone rang again, making me jump so badly I knocked a stack of empty rental cases off the counter. They clattered to the floor in a cascade of plastic. I grabbed the receiver. "What do you want?" "You're getting ahead of yourself," the muffled voice said. There was something almost amused in their tone now. "You need to understand the context first. Check the shelf. Horror section, second row from the bottom, between Friday the 13th Part 6 and Fright Night." "I'm not playing this game anymore," I said, but even as I spoke, my feet were already carrying me toward the back corner of the store, toward the horror section where fake cobwebs gathered dust on the shelves. "Yes, you are," the voice said. "You're already playing. You just don't know the rules yet." They hung up before I could respond. The horror section occupied the back right corner of the store, a L-shaped arrangement of shelves that created a little alcove separate from the main floor. We decorated it with Halloween props years ago, plastic skeletons, rubber bats, the aforementioned cobwebs, and never bothered to take them down. It had become part of the store's character, the spooky corner where teenage horror fans would congregate on Friday nights, arguing about whether The Exorcist was scarier than The Omen. I knelt down in front of the second shelf from the bottom, scanning the alphabetized rows. Friday the 13th Part 6, one of our 3 copies, its case worn from countless rentals. And next to it, Fright Night, featuring Chris Sarandon's vampire grin on the cover. And between them, wedged so tightly I almost missed it, was another black clamshell case. Part 3, according to the masking tape label. My hands were steady now as I pulled it free from the shelf. That initial spike of adrenaline had faded into something else, a kind of cold focus, the feeling you get when you're committed to seeing something through even if you know it's a bad idea. I was going to watch this tape. I was going to figure out what was happening. And then I was going to decide whether to call the police or Kevin or just go home and pretend this night never happened. I walked back to the counter, loaded the tape, and pressed play. This one was different. The camera was handheld now, the footage shaky and unstable, like whoever was filming was walking through the store. The timestamp showed the same date, August 15th, but a later time, 10:23 p.m. The camera panned across empty shelves, catching glimpses of familiar movie posters and promotional materials. Braveheart, Casino, Toy Story. The camera turned a corner, moving into what I now recognized as the back office area. A desk came into view, cluttered with paperwork and rental receipts. A corkboard on the wall held a work schedule, employee phone numbers, a Polaroid of the staff at some long-ago Christmas party. And sitting at the desk, facing away from the camera, was someone in a Video World vest. My breath caught. This wasn't just similar to Video World, this was Video World. That was Kevin's desk. That was our corkboard, our schedule. This footage had been shot here, in this building, in this room I'd walked past a dozen times tonight. The person at the desk, the employee, I realized, judging by the vest, didn't seem to notice they were being filmed. They were hunched over something on the desk, their shoulders moving slightly, like they were writing. The camera moved closer. Closer. The person filming was right behind the seated employee now, so close they could have reached out and touched them. The employee turned around. I couldn't see their face. The camera had jerked away at that exact moment, pointed at the floor, showing only the worn office carpet and someone's sneakers, the employees, probably, as they stood up from the desk. There was a scuffle, the image bouncing wildly, and then the screen went black. When the image returned, maybe 10 seconds later, the camera was on the floor pointing at an odd angle toward the office door. I could see movement in the frame, shadows shifting, something being dragged across the floor, but couldn't make out details. Then a hand appeared in front of the lens, reaching for the camera, and the tape ended. I stood frozen, the implications crashing over me in waves. Someone had filmed this, here in Video World, 2 months ago. Someone had filmed one of our employees, Kevin. Another closing shift worker, and then there had been some kind of struggle. My mind raced back to 2 months ago. Late August. Had anything happened? Had anyone quit suddenly? Had there been any incidents? I tried to remember but came up blank. Summer had been busy, a blur of blockbuster rentals and long shifts. The fall semester had started shortly after, consuming my attention with classes and homework. If something had happened at the store, I'd missed it or forgotten it. The phone rang again. I snatched it up. What did you do? Me? The voice sounded genuinely surprised. I didn't do anything. I'm just showing you what happened. What happened to who? Who was that in the office? You haven't figured it out yet? A pause. I suppose you wouldn't. You weren't working that night. That night? You mean August 15th? Check the schedule, they said. Kevin keeps copies in the filing cabinet. Second drawer down. Look up August 15th and see who was closing. Why? What's the point of all this? But the line was already dead. I stared at the phone for a long moment, then set it down and walked toward Kevin's office. The door was unlocked. It always was, even though Kevin claimed he locked it every night. The office was small and cramped, dominated by the desk and filing cabinet I'd seen in the footage. Everything looked exactly the same as it had in the video, down to the position of the coffee mug holding pens and the angle of the desk calendar. The filing cabinet drawer squeaked as I pulled it open. Inside were manila folders labeled by month, each one stuffed with work schedules, inventory reports, and various administrative papers. I flipped through them until I found August 1996. The schedules were handwritten on photocopied forms, Kevin's blocky handwriting marking who worked which shifts. I ran my finger down the August 15th column, past the morning shift, Kevin and Rachel, past the afternoon shift, Sarah and Tom, down to the closing shift. One name. Marcus Chen. Marcus. I tried to picture him and came up with only a vague impression, Asian guy, early 20s, quiet, into horror movies. He'd worked here when I started last spring, one of those employees who kept to himself and did his job without complaint. And then, when had I last seen him? I couldn't remember him being around recently. Had he quit? Been fired? I pulled out my phone, a bulky Nokia that I mostly used for emergencies, and scrolled through my contacts, but I didn't have Marcus's number. I wasn't even sure I'd ever had it. We'd been co-workers, not friends. The phone on Kevin's desk rang, the sound unnaturally loud in the small office. Not my cell phone, the store's landline, the same one that had been ringing all night. I picked it up. "You found it," the voice said. "Now you're starting to understand. Where's Marcus? What happened to him?" "Marcus is gone," they said simply. "And you need to see the rest before you can understand why." "The rest? How many more tapes are there?" "Just 2 more. For tonight, anyway. Check the new releases wall. Behind the cardboard display for Independence Day." And then a pause. "Then check the bathroom." The bathroom? But they'd already hung up. I walked out of the office on legs that felt disconnected from my body, my mind struggling to process what I was learning. Marcus Chen had been working a closing shift 2 months ago. Someone had filmed him in the office. There had been some kind of struggle. And now Marcus was gone. The cardboard display for Independence Day stood against the new releases wall, a life-sized cutout of a fighter jet with Will Smith's face grinning from the cockpit. We were supposed to have taken it down weeks ago, but it had become a kind of ironic landmark in the store, and customers had started taking pictures with it. I grabbed the edge of the display and pulled it away from the wall. Another black clamshell case sat on the floor behind it, tucked into the corner where no one would see it without moving the display. Part 4. Read the label. I was almost running as I carried it back to the VCR. My hands shook as I loaded the tape. The fear that had been lurking at the edges of my awareness all night was blooming into full-fledged terror now, but I couldn't stop. I needed to see what happened. I needed to know. The tape began with the same fixed camera angle from the first 2 tapes, showing the interior of Video World. Same date, August 15th, but now the timestamp showed 10:45 p.m. The store looked different than it had in the earlier footage. Things were disturbed. The cart of videos that the figure had been gathering was now overturned in the center aisle, tapes scattered across the floor. The door to the office stood open, darkness visible beyond. Nothing moved for almost a minute. Just the empty store, the scattered tapes, the silent testimony of something having gone wrong. Then the hooded figure appeared again, this time entering from the front of the store. They walked through the debris without seeming to notice it, moving with that same deliberate purpose toward the camera. When they reached the spot directly below the lens, they stopped and looked up. This time, just for a moment, the hood fell back enough for me to catch a glimpse of their face. I didn't recognize them. It was just a flash, pale skin, dark eyes, maybe 25 or 30 years old, before they reached up and adjusted the hood, concealing themselves again. They raised their hand, and I saw they were holding something. The same photograph from the second tape, but now they held it closer to the camera. I leaned in, squinting at the screen. The photo showed a young man in a Video World vest, smiling at the camera. Dark hair, glasses, unmistakably Marcus Chen. Behind him, I could see the familiar interior of our store. The figure in the hoodie held the photo for several seconds, making sure the camera captured it clearly. Then they reached into their other pocket and pulled out something else. A Video World name tag. They held it next to the photo. Even through the grainy footage, I could read the name printed on it, Marcus. The figure looked up at the camera one more time. Their lips moved, forming words without sound. I wished desperately for audio, for any way to know what they were saying. Then they turned and walked out of frame, taking the photo and name tag with them. The tape continued for another 30 seconds, showing nothing but the empty, ransacked store, before cutting to black. I ejected the tape with numb fingers. The pieces were coming together now, forming a picture I didn't want to see. Someone had been in the store on August 15th. They'd filmed Marcus. There had been a struggle. Marcus had disappeared. And now, 2 months later, someone was showing me what had happened. But why? Why leave these tapes? Why call me? Why tonight? The bathroom. They'd said to check the bathroom. Video World had 2 bathrooms, both accessible through a short hallway off the main floor. One labeled men, one labeled women, both rarely used by anyone except employees since customers weren't technically supposed to use them. I didn't want to go down that hallway. Every horror movie I'd ever watched had taught me that walking toward danger was the surest way to become a victim. The smart character, the one who survived, was the one who ran. But I couldn't run. Not yet. Not without knowing. The hallway was narrow and dimly lit, the fluorescent tube overhead flickering with age. My footsteps echoed off the walls as I approached the men's room door. It was slightly ajar, darkness visible in the gap. I pushed it open. The bathroom was small, just a toilet, a sink, and a mirror above it. The light switch didn't work. I flicked it up and down several times with no result. But enough light spilled in from the hallway for me to see. There, balanced on the edge of the sink, was the final tape. Part 5. I grabbed it and backed out of the bathroom quickly, suddenly terrified that the door would slam shut, that the lights would go out, that something would grab me from the darkness. But nothing happened. The store remained quiet except for the hum of the rewinders and the soft patter of rain against the windows. Back at the counter, I loaded the final tape. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it twice. The VCR accepted it with a mechanical whir, and the screen flickered to life. This tape was different from all the others. The footage was from a different camera, positioned somewhere new. I realized after a moment that it was in the bathroom, probably mounted in the corner near the ceiling. The angle showed the sink, the mirror, and part of the toilet. The timestamp showed August 15th, 11:17 p.m. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the bathroom door opened, and someone stumbled in. Marcus. It was definitely Marcus Chen, though he looked nothing like the smiling employee in the photograph. His Video World vest was torn, his face pale and frightened. He lurched to the sink and gripped the edge, staring at his reflection in the mirror. His lips were moving. He was talking to himself, or maybe praying. I couldn't tell. He pulled out his cell phone, one of those flip phones that had been popular in the mid-90s, and tried to dial. His hands were shaking. After a moment, he gave up and set the phone on the sink. Then he turned toward the bathroom door, his body tensing. Someone else was there. I couldn't see them, they were just outside the camera's range, but Marcus could see them. He held up his hands in a defensive gesture, backing against the sink. The door swung open further, and the hooded figure from the other tapes entered the frame. Marcus was talking rapidly now, his face a mask of fear. The figure didn't respond, just moved closer. Marcus grabbed his cell phone and threw it, the small device bouncing off the figure's shoulder without effect. They grabbed Marcus. What happened next happened fast. Too fast for me to fully process. There was a struggle, Marcus fighting desperately, the figure overpowering him with methodical efficiency. They forced him to his knees. They produced something from their pocket, I couldn't see what. And then Marcus stopped struggling. He just stopped. His body went limp. The figure held him for a moment, then carefully lowered him to the floor out of the camera's view. They stood up and looked directly into the camera. Raised one hand in that same slow wave. Then they reached up and turned off the camera. The screen went black. I stood there in the silent video store, the remote control slipping from my nerveless fingers and clattering on the counter. My mind was blank, shock overriding thought. I'd just watched Marcus Chin die. Or at least, I'd watched something terrible happen to him. And whoever had done it had known about the cameras. Had filmed it deliberately. Had saved the footage. And now, 2 months later, had left it for me to find. The phone rang. I picked it up automatically, beyond the point of fear now, operating on something like autopilot. You've seen it all now, the voice said. They weren't trying to disguise it anymore. I still didn't recognize it, but it was clearer now, more human. You understand what happened. Why? My voice came out as a whisper. Why did you kill him? I didn't kill him, they said, and there was something in their tone. Was it defensive? I saved him. Saved him? I just watched you. You watched me release him from his suffering. From the burden of this place, this job, this endless cycle of opening and closing, rewinding and reshelving. Marcus understood. In the end, he was grateful. I swallowed hard against the bile rising in my throat. You're insane. Am I? Tell me something. How long have you worked at Video World? 9 months, I answered without thinking. And in those 9 months, how many nights have you spent here alone, doing exactly what you're doing right now? Rewinding tapes, reshelving movies, cleaning up after customers who treat this place like their personal storage unit? I didn't answer. It's meaningless work, they continued. It serves no purpose. These tapes, these movies, they're just entertainment. Distractions. And you waste your life making sure they're in the right place on the right shelf so that people can waste their lives watching them. That doesn't justify. I'm not asking you to justify anything. I'm telling you that I understand. I worked here too, you know. Years ago, before Kevin, before this location even. I understand what it does to you, how it hollows you out. And I'm offering you the same gift I gave Marcus. The words hit me like ice water. You want to kill me. I want to free you, they corrected. But not tonight. Tonight is just an introduction. A demonstration. I wanted you to see what happened to Marcus, to understand that it was peaceful. That he accepted it in the end. He was terrified, I said, my voice shaking with anger now. He tried to fight you. He tried to call for help. At first, yes. Fear is natural. But in those final moments, when he understood what I was offering, he let go. He accepted peace. "You're going to turn yourself in," I said, though I had no idea how I could make them do that. "I'm calling the police. They'll find Marcus's body, They won't find anything," the voice interrupted. "Marcus is gone. Not just dead, he's gone. No body, no evidence, no trace. Just another employee who quit without notice, who moved away, who decided this job wasn't worth it anymore." How many people do you think have done exactly that? How many Video World employees have just disappeared into their lives? I thought about the turnover rate at the store. The revolving door of college students and part-timers who worked for a few months and then vanished. Sarah had mentioned once that she was the longest tenured employee besides Kevin, and she'd only been here for 2 years. "The police won't care about one missing video store clerk," the voice continued. "Especially when there's no evidence of foul play." Kevin filed the paperwork. Marcus's last paycheck was mailed to his apartment. His parents think he moved to Seattle to work in tech. Everyone has a story that makes sense. Everyone except you. Why me? Why show this to me? There was a long pause. Rain hammered against the windows, and somewhere in the distance, I heard a car alarm going off. "Because you're next," they said finally. "Not tonight. But soon. I'm giving you time to prepare, time to understand, time to make peace with it. Marcus didn't have that. But you do. Consider it a gift. I'll tell Kevin. I'll tell the police. You'll do nothing," they said, and now there was steel in their voice. "Because if you do, I'll know. And I won't wait. I won't be gentle. And it won't just be you. Kevin, Sarah, Tom, Rachel, everyone who works at Video World. Do you understand?" My throat was too tight to speak. "Do you understand?" they repeated. "Yes," I whispered. "Good. Now finish your closing duties. Rewind the tapes. Vacuum the floors. Make everything perfect. And then go home. Lock your doors. And wait." The line went dead. I stood there holding the phone for a long time, my mind spinning uselessly like a broken rewinder. Then, moving like a robot, I hung up and looked around the store. The tapes still needed to be rewound. The floors still needed to be vacuumed. The drop box still needed to be checked one final time. And I was going to do all of it. Not because I believed the threat, or rather, not just because I believed it, but because some part of my brain, the part that had been trained through 9 months of closing shifts, couldn't leave the work unfinished. The ritual of closing demanded completion. I ejected the final tape from the VCR and set it aside with the others. All 5 tapes, lined up on the counter like evidence. Then I picked them up, walked to the back office, and locked them in Kevin's filing cabinet, in the folder labeled August 1996, right behind Marcus's final work schedule. The rewinders had finished their cycles. I began matching tapes to cases, my hands moving through the familiar motions while my mind raced ahead, trying to plan. I could call the police from my car. I could drive straight to the station. I could. The lights went out. All of them, all at once. The fluorescents overhead, the promotional TV, even the small lamp on the checkout counter. The store plunged into darkness broken only by the orange glow of streetlights filtering through the rain-streaked windows. I froze, my hand still gripping a copy of The Crow. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Hello?" I called out, hating how small my voice sounded. No answer. Just the rain and the distant car alarm and the sound of my own breathing. The emergency exit lights should have kicked on. We had battery-powered units installed after a power outage last year, but they remained dark. Someone had disabled them. Or the batteries were dead. Or a sound. From the back of the store. The horror section. Footsteps on the worn carpet, moving slowly, deliberately, heading toward the front. I dropped the tape and ran for the door, my sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. My hands fumbled with the deadbolt in the darkness, the metal cold and slippery under my sweating palms. Finally, it turned. I yanked the door open and stumbled out into the rain. The parking lot was empty. My car sat exactly where I'd left it, water streaming down its windows. The dark sedan that had been parked near the dumpsters was gone. I ran to my Civic, keys already in hand, and jammed them into the lock. The door opened. I threw myself inside and locked it immediately, my wet clothes soaking into the fabric seats. For a long moment, I just sat there, engine off, staring at the dark video world through the rain-blurred windshield. The store was completely black inside, no sign of movement, no indication that anyone was in there. Had I imagined the footsteps? Had the power just gone out coincidentally? Was I letting fear override reason? I started the engine. The dashboard lights glowed to life, and the radio crackled on, catching the tail end of some late-night talk show. The normalcy of it was jarring. I should drive to the police station. I should tell them everything. But what would I tell them? That I'd found some VHS tapes that showed footage of a former coworker? That I'd received some creepy phone calls? That someone claimed to have killed Marcus Chen, but there was no body, no evidence, nothing except grainy video that could have been staged? They'd think I was crazy. Or worse, they'd think I was involved somehow. And if the caller was watching, if they knew I'd gone to the police. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the parking space. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm as I pulled out of the lot and onto the main road, leaving Video World behind in my rearview mirror. I drove home on autopilot, my mind replaying the footage over and over. Marcus being forced to his knees. The figure turning off the camera. That final wave. My apartment was in a complex about 15 minutes from the store, a generic two-bedroom that I shared with a roommate who worked night shifts at the hospital. She wouldn't be home until morning, which meant I'd be alone. I parked in my assigned spot and sat in the car for several minutes, scanning the parking lot for any sign of the dark sedan, any indication I'd been followed. Nothing. Just other residents' cars, the dumpsters, the flickering light above the stairwell to the second floor. Finally, I forced myself to get out and run to my apartment, keys clutched between my fingers like a makeshift weapon. The hallway was empty. My door was locked, exactly as I'd left it that morning. Inside, I locked the deadbolt, the chain, and wedged a chair under the doorknob for good measure. Then I checked every window, every closet, under the beds, in the bathroom. Empty. I was alone. I peeled off my wet clothes and stood under a hot shower for 20 minutes, trying to wash away the fear and the memory of those tapes. But when I closed my eyes, I could still see Marcus's face, pale and terrified in that bathroom. After the shower, I pulled on dry clothes and made myself a cup of tea I didn't drink. I sat on the couch with the TV on for company, some late-night infomercial selling kitchen gadgets, and tried to think. Facts. Marcus Chen had disappeared 2 months ago. Someone had filmed his final night at Video World. Someone had left those tapes for me to find. Someone had called me, threatened me, told me I was next. Questions. Who was the person in the hoodie? How had they gotten into the store to leave the tapes? Where was Marcus's body? And most importantly, why me? I wasn't close to Marcus. We'd worked together, sure, but we'd never hung out outside of work, never had a real conversation beyond small talk about movie rentals and difficult customers. Why would someone target both of us? Unless it wasn't about us specifically. Unless it was about Video World itself. The caller had said they'd worked at a video store 2 years ago. Maybe this was about the job, about the industry. Some kind of vendetta against video rental culture, or corporations, or... My phone rang. Not the apartment landline. My cell phone, sitting on the coffee table where I dumped it after coming home. The Nokia's tiny screen glowed in the dimness, showing an unknown number. I stared at it for 3 rings before I answered. "I told you to go home," the voice said. "Good. You listened. How did you get this number?" "I have all the employee files, remember? Everything Kevin keeps in that filing cabinet, including emergency contact information." I felt sick. They'd been in the office, going through our personal information. They knew where I lived. They probably knew my roommate's schedule, knew I'd be alone tonight. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to think about what I showed you tonight. Really think about it." Marcus was suffering. Maybe he didn't know it. Maybe he convinced himself he was fine, but he was drowning in the meaninglessness of it all. And I helped him. You killed him. I freed him. And when you're ready, when you've accepted what's coming, I'll free you too. Until then, just go about your life. Go to work. Go to class. But remember that I'm watching. That I'm waiting. That when the time is right, I'll come for you. And if I run? If I quit the job and move away? Then I'll find you. Or I'll find someone else at Video World. Someone who doesn't deserve what's coming. Is that what you want? For Sarah to take your place? I thought of Sarah's smile, her terrible jokes about late fees, the way she always brought donuts on Sunday shifts. "No," I said quietly. "I didn't think so. You're a good person. That's why I chose you." Marcus was good too. The world doesn't deserve people like you, doesn't appreciate what you give. But I do. I see you. When? I asked, surprised by my own question. When are you going to? Soon, they said. But not yet. You'll know when the time comes. There will be signs. Another closing shift. Another set of tapes. And when you see them, you'll understand that it's time. I could go to the police tomorrow. I could tell them everything. You could, they agreed. But you won't. Because you're curious now. Because part of you wants to know how this ends. And because you're hoping, somewhere deep down, that maybe I'm right. That maybe there is something better than this. Than the endless rewinding and reshelving and meaningless work. They hung up before I could respond. I sat there on my couch until the infomercial ended and another began, staring at nothing, my tea growing cold beside me. The caller was wrong. They had to be wrong. My life wasn't meaningless. My job wasn't suffering. But as I sat there in the early hours of the morning, I couldn't quite convince myself of that. Part 3, the next day, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. I didn't sleep. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marcus's face, heard the caller's voice, felt the weight of what I'd learned. By the time dawn crept through my blinds, I'd been awake for over 24 hours, running on nothing but fear and caffeine. My roommate came home at 7 a.m., exhausted from her shift, and immediately noticed something was wrong. I told her I was coming down with something, which wasn't entirely a lie. I felt sick, nauseous, feverish, disconnected from reality. She offered to call in sick for me at Video World, but I told her I wasn't scheduled today anyway. That much was true. I had the day off, which meant I had time to figure out what to do next. After she went to bed, I made myself breakfast I couldn't eat and tried to think rationally about my situation. The problem was that everything seemed equally irrational. Going to the police seemed crazy. Not going to the police seemed crazy. Continuing to work at Video World seemed crazy. Quitting seemed crazy. I kept coming back to the same question, why me? Finally, around 10 a.m., I made a decision. If I wanted to understand what was happening, I needed more information. And the best place to start was with Marcus himself. I knew a few basic facts. Marcus had worked at Video World for about 6 months before disappearing in August. He'd been quiet, kept to himself, was into horror movies. His parents thought he'd moved to Seattle. That last detail stuck with me. Someone had convinced Marcus's parents he'd moved away. Someone had tied up that loose end. The caller? Or had Marcus actually planned to move, and his disappearance had just been convenient cover? I grabbed my laptop and started searching. Marcus Chen Seattle brought up thousands of results. It was a common name. I tried adding Video World but got nothing useful. I tried Marcus Chen missing Ohio and got a few results that weren't him. Dead end. I tried a different approach. I logged into my email and searched for any messages from Marcus. We'd occasionally used email for shift swaps and schedule changes. I found a few threads from last spring, mostly logistical stuff, until I hit one from early August. The subject line was, "Can you cover closing on the 15th? I opened it, my heart racing. Marcus, hey, I know this is last minute, but any chance you can cover my closing shift on August 15th? Something came up and I really need that night off. Me, sorry, I have a paper due the next day. Can't do late night. Maybe ask Tom? Marcus, no worries, I'll figure something out." That was it. The last email I'd ever received from Marcus Chen, asking someone to cover the shift where he'd die. Where he'd be freed, according to the caller. Something came up. What had come up? Had he known something was going to happen that night? Had he tried to avoid it? I searched through the rest of my emails, looking for anything else from Marcus, any clue about what had been going on in his life. But there was nothing, just work-related messages about schedules and inventory and the occasional customer complaint. I needed more information, which meant I needed to talk to someone who'd known Marcus better than I had. And the person who fit that description was Kevin. I checked the time, 10:47 a.m. Kevin would be at the store by now, probably dealing with the morning rush of parents returning their kids' movies before the late fees kicked in. I could call him, but this conversation needed to happen in person. I needed to see his face, gauge his reactions, figure out if he knew anything about what had happened. I threw on jeans and a hoodie, grabbed my keys, and headed for the door. Then I paused, my hand on the doorknob, and went back to the kitchen. I grabbed the biggest knife we had, a chef's knife my roommate used for cooking, and wrapped it in a dish towel. I felt ridiculous, like a character in a bad thriller, but I also felt slightly safer. The drive to Video World took 20 minutes in Saturday morning traffic. The rain from last night had cleared, leaving everything damp and gray. The strip mall parking lot was moderately full, people hitting up the subway for lunch, a few cars outside the laundromat, a handful outside Video World. I parked in the same spot I'd used last night and sat for a moment, gathering my courage. Through the window, I could see Kevin behind the counter, ringing up a customer. Everything looked normal. Safe. Like last night had been a bad dream. But the knife wrapped in a towel on my passenger seat reminded me it wasn't. I got out of the car and walked to the store, pushing through the glass door into the familiar smell of carpet and plastic cases and artificial butter from the popcorn machine we ran on weekends. The promotional TV was playing the same loop as always. The cardboard standees stood in their familiar positions. Kevin looked up and smiled when he saw me. "Hey! Thought you had the day off?" "I do." Just wanted to talk to you about something. His smile faded slightly, picking up on my tone. Everything okay? You look rough. Didn't sleep well. I glanced around the store. A mom with 2 kids was browsing the family section. An older couple was debating something in comedy. No one was paying attention to us. Can we talk in your office? Sure, yeah. Let me just. He turned to Sarah, who was restocking the new releases wall. Can you watch the counter for a few? Sarah gave him a thumbs up, and Kevin gestured for me to follow him to the back. The office looked exactly the same as it had last night, exactly the same as it had in the footage. The desk, the filing cabinet, the corkboard with its work schedules and employee photos. I felt a chill seeing it in daylight, knowing what had happened here. Kevin closed the door and leaned against his desk, crossing his arms. So what's up? You quitting? Because if this is about the schedule next week, I can probably. Marcus Chen, I interrupted. What happened to him? Kevin blinked, clearly not expecting that question. Marcus? He quit back in August, I think. Moved away. Why? Where did he move to? Seattle, I think he said. Something about a tech job. Kind of sudden, actually. He called me on like a Wednesday and said he was leaving that weekend. Didn't even work out his 2 weeks. Kevin frowned. Why are you asking about Marcus? Did you ever talk to him after he left? Get a forwarding address, a phone number? No, I mailed his last check to his apartment. Why? Did he leave something here? I studied Kevin's face, looking for any sign that he was lying, that he knew more than he was saying. But he just looked confused and mildly concerned. Did anything weird happen the night he quit? The last shift he worked? Kevin thought about it. Not that I know of. I wasn't here. I left early that night, had a thing. Marcus closed alone. Everything was fine the next morning when I came in, except he'd left a note in the office saying he quit. Is this about money? Did he take something? No, nothing like that. I couldn't tell him about the tapes, not yet. Not until I understood more. I had a weird dream about him last night and wanted to make sure he was okay. Kevin's expression softened into something like pity. You know, it's actually kind of nice that you're worried about him. Most people just move on, don't think twice about coworkers once they're gone. But I'm sure Marcus is fine. He seemed excited about the Seattle thing. Did you ever meet his parents? Or anyone from his family? No, why would I? Kevin was starting to look suspicious now. Look, I appreciate you caring, but this is getting kind of weird. Is there something specific you're worried about? I couldn't push any further without revealing what I knew. No, sorry. You're right, it's weird. I just had this vivid dream and it freaked me out. I'll let you get back to work. Kevin studied me for another moment, then shrugged. Okay. But seriously, if something's bothering you, you can talk to me. That's what I'm here for. Well, that and making sure we don't get robbed. He laughed at his own joke. I forced a smile and left the office, walking quickly through the store and out to my car. That conversation had told me almost nothing useful, except for one detail. Kevin had left early the night of August 15th. He'd left Marcus to close alone. Which meant Marcus had been alone when the hooded figure showed up. Alone and vulnerable. Back in my car, I pulled out my phone and searched for Marcus Chen Seattle again, this time with different parameters. I found a LinkedIn profile that might have been him, but it hadn't been updated since 2015. I found a Twitter account that was probably him, but the last post was from July 1996, closing shift on a Friday night equals my entire weekend gone. Nothing since August. I tried one more search, Marcus Chen Obituary, Ohio. If he died, if his body had been found, there would be a record of it. But the search came up empty. The caller had been right. Marcus had just disappeared. And the world had barely noticed. I sat in the parking lot, watching customers come and go from Video World, and tried to figure out my next move. The obvious answer was the police. Show them the tapes, tell them about the calls, let them handle it. But I kept thinking about the threat. If I went to the police and the caller found out, they'd hurt someone else. Sarah. Tom. Rachel. Maybe even Kevin. And there was another problem. The tapes were still in Kevin's filing cabinet. I'd have to break into the store to get them, or wait until I worked another shift and hope I could grab them without anyone noticing. Unless I could convince Kevin to show them to me. Tell him I'd found something weird in the filing cabinet, ask him to check August's folder. My phone rang. The Nokia screen showed unknown number. I answered it. "You went to the store," the voice said. No greeting, just accusation. I looked around the parking lot frantically, searching for whoever was watching me. The cars all looked normal. No dark sedan. No hooded figures lurking between the dumpsters. How do you know that? I'm always watching Video World. It's important to me. You should know that by now. I was just talking to Kevin. That's not against the rules, is it? What did you tell him? Nothing. I asked about Marcus, but I didn't tell him about the tapes. I didn't tell him anything. There was a pause. I could hear them breathing, considering. Good, they said finally. That was smart. Kevin doesn't need to know. He wouldn't understand anyway. He's too invested in the system, too comfortable with the meaninglessness. He'll never be free. What do you mean? Kevin's been managing video stores for 15 years. 15 years of his life, gone, spent making sure movies are in the right order. And he thinks it matters. He thinks he's building something. That's what makes him useless. Useless for what? For transcendence. For understanding. Some people are too far gone, too committed to the lie. But you're still young. Still searching. Still capable of seeing the truth. The truth that you're a murderer? The truth that we're all dying slowly, one closing shift at a time. I just speed up the process. Make it mean something. A pause. I'm going to let you go now. But remember what I said. Don't go to the police. Don't tell anyone. And when the time comes, don't fight it. Marcus fought, and it made things harder for both of us. You can choose peace. Wait. But they'd already hung up. I started my car and pulled out of the parking lot, driving with no particular destination in mind. I just needed to move, to feel like I had some control over something. I ended up on the highway, heading north toward the state line, the radio playing some grunge song I'd normally love but couldn't focus on. I had to do something. I couldn't just wait around for the caller to decide it was my turn to be freed. But what? What could I do without putting other people at risk? An idea started forming in my mind. It was risky and probably stupid, but it was something. The caller had mentioned they'd worked at a video store years ago. They knew Video World intimately, knew where the cameras were, knew Kevin's schedule. They'd either worked at this specific store or one very similar to it. Which meant there might be records. Employee files. Maybe even photos. I needed to get back into that filing cabinet. But not during business hours, when Kevin or Sarah might ask questions. I needed to get in after hours, during a closing shift. Which meant I needed to work again. I pulled off at the next exit and found a gas station with a payphone. I called Video World. Video World, this is Sarah. How can I help you? Hey Sarah, it's me. Is Kevin still there? Yeah, hold on. A pause, then Kevin's voice. What's up? I know I'm not on the schedule until Thursday, but I could really use some extra hours if anyone needs coverage. Money's tight, you know? Let me check. I heard papers shuffling. Actually, yeah. Tom was supposed to close tomorrow night, but he just called in sick. You want it? Tomorrow night. Sunday. That would give me time to prepare. Perfect. What time? We close at 9 on Sundays. Can you be here by 4 to cover the evening shift? I'll be there. Great. Thanks for being flexible. I hung up and stood there in the gas station parking lot, wondering if I'd just made a terrible mistake. But it was done now. Tomorrow night, I'd work a closing shift at Video World. And if the caller was watching, if they were planning their next move, maybe I could figure out who they were before they figured out how to get to me. I drove home and spent the rest of the day trying to prepare. I made a list of everything I needed to look for in the filing cabinet: employee records from the last 5 years, anyone who'd quit suddenly, anyone who'd worked here when Marcus had. I wrote down questions I wanted answers to: who had installed the cameras? When? Did Kevin know about them? My roommate woke up around 6 p.m. and found me surrounded by notes and printouts, my laptop open to a Google Maps view of Video World and the surrounding area. You writing a paper or planning a heist? She joked. Paper, I lied. For my film studies class. On video stores? On the cultural impact of video rental culture in the 90s. She bought it, or at least pretended to, and left me alone to make herself dinner. I couldn't eat. My stomach was twisted in knots, anxiety and fear and something else, a weird kind of anticipation. I was scared, yes, but I was also tired of being passive, of just waiting for bad things to happen. Tomorrow night, I was going to take control. I just hoped I'd survive it. Part 4, the Sunday shift, 4 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Sunday afternoon at Video World was always slow. Families were finishing their weekends, not starting them, and the serious movie buffs didn't usually come in until evening. When I arrived at 4 p.m., the store was nearly empty, just Kevin restocking the kids section and an elderly man browsing westerns. "You're a lifesaver," Kevin said when he saw me. Tom sounded really sick on the phone. "I think it's that flu that's been going around." "No problem." I set my backpack behind the counter. Inside, wrapped in a sweatshirt, was the kitchen knife. I felt ridiculous bringing it, but after last night, I wasn't taking chances. "Sarah's here until 6, then it's just you for closing." "Standard stuff: rewind returns, vacuum, check the drop box." "Should be an easy night." Kevin grabbed his jacket from the office. "I'm heading out." "Got a date tonight, believe it or not." "Good luck," I said, managing a smile. "Thanks. See you Tuesday." Kevin left, and I was alone with Sarah and the elderly Western fan. Sarah was rearranging the new releases, humming along to whatever was playing on the store radio, some pop song that had been overplayed all summer. "Quiet day?" I asked, making conversation. "Dead. We've had like 8 customers total." She glanced over at me. "You okay? You look tired. Didn't sleep well. Join the club." "I had the weirdest dreams last night. I was working here, but the store was like endless. The aisles just kept going and going, and I was trying to find this one specific movie, but every time I thought I'd found it, it would be a different movie." She laughed. "I should stop watching weird stuff before bed." "Yeah," I said absently, my mind elsewhere. The filing cabinet was in Kevin's office, just 20 feet away. I could go in there right now, search through the August folder, grab the tapes. But Sarah would see me, would ask questions. I needed to wait until she left at 6. The next 2 hours crawled by. The elderly man eventually rented the searchers and left. A young couple came in looking for something romantic and left with Sleepless in Seattle. A group of teenagers spent 20 minutes in the horror section before deciding they didn't have enough money and leaving empty-handed. Sarah made small talk about her classes, her roommate drama, a date she had next weekend. I tried to participate in the conversation, but my mind kept drifting to the office, to the filing cabinet, to what I might find there. Finally, at 6 p.m., Sarah grabbed her jacket. "You good to close by yourself?" "Yeah, no problem." "Cool. See you Tuesday." The door chimed as she left, and I was alone in the store. I waited 5 minutes, just to be sure Sarah wasn't coming back for something she'd forgotten. Then I walked to the office and opened the filing cabinet's second drawer. The August 1996 folder was right where I'd left it. I pulled out the work schedules first, flipping through them until I found August 15th. Marcus's name was written in Kevin's blocky handwriting for the closing shift, with a note in the margin, called and working late. So Kevin had planned to work that night but had changed his mind. Left early, according to what he'd told me yesterday. Which meant Marcus had closed the loan at the last minute, maybe without much warning. Had that been part of the plan? Had the killer known Kevin would leave early? I set the schedules aside and dug deeper into the folder. Inventory reports, vendor invoices, a complaint letter from a customer about a damaged tape. And at the very bottom, wrapped in a rubber band, were the 5 black clamshell cases I'd hidden there. The tapes. I pulled them out and held them, feeling their weight. Evidence. Proof of what had happened to Marcus. I should take them to the police tonight, right after my shift. Show them everything, tell them about the calls, let them protect me. But the threat rang in my ears, if you tell anyone, I'll know. How would they know? Were they watching the store right now? Were there more cameras I hadn't noticed? I scanned the office, looking for any sign of surveillance equipment. The corkboard, the desk, the shelves, nothing looked suspicious. But the cameras in the first tape had been well hidden. I might be being filmed right now and not even know it. I put the tapes back in the filing cabinet and pulled out a different folder, Employee Records, Current. Inside were photocopies of everyone's job applications, emergency contact forms, tax documents. I flipped through until I found my own. There was my hastily written application from last spring, my barely legible emergency contact information. And next to mine was Sarah's. And Tom's. And Rachel's. The caller had said they had all the employee files. They'd been in this office, going through this cabinet. They knew everything about us. I moved to the next folder, Employee Records, Former. This was what I really needed. The names and faces of everyone who'd worked at Video World before, anyone who might have become obsessed, who might have come back seeking revenge or transcendence or whatever twisted thing the caller wanted. The folder was thick, full of applications and termination notices dating back years. I started flipping through, looking for anything that might help. James Rodriguez worked here in 1992 to 1993, quit to take a job at Best Buy. Amy Patterson worked here in 1994, fired for theft. David Chen worked here in 1991 to 1992, quit for college. Wait. Chen. Same last name as Marcus. I pulled out David Chen's file and examined it more closely. The application was old, yellowed with age, but the photo stapled to the corner showed an Asian man in his early 20s with dark hair and glasses. He looked like Marcus. Not identical, but similar enough that they could be related. Brothers? Cousins? I checked the emergency contact information. Under relationship, it listed, brother of Marcus Chen, age 14. My hands shook as I held the paper. David had worked here 5 years before Marcus. And Marcus had been listed as his emergency contact, even though he was just 14 at the time. Had Marcus come to work here because of David? Had he been following in his brother's footsteps? I dug back through the Employee Records, Current folder, searching for Marcus's application. When I found it, I checked his emergency contacts. Under it, in case of emergency, contact, it listed, David Chen, brother, with a Seattle phone number. Seattle. Where Marcus was supposedly living now. The pieces were falling into place, but I still didn't understand the picture they were forming. Why would someone target Marcus specifically? And what did David have to do with it? I pulled out my cell phone and stared at the Seattle number on Marcus's application. I should call it. Ask David if he'd heard from his brother. Find out if Marcus really had moved to Seattle. But if I called, if I started asking questions, the caller might find out. Might decide to move up their timeline. I was still debating when the store phone rang, the shrill sound making me jump. I picked up the office extension. Video World, how can I help you? You're in the office, the voice said. Not a question. A statement. I felt cold all over. How do you know that? I told you. I'm always watching. A pause. What did you find? There was no point lying. They clearly knew I was going through the files. David Chen. Marcus's brother. He worked here before. Very good. You're smarter than I thought. Most people wouldn't have made that connection. What happened to David? Why don't you ask him yourself? You have his number right there. I looked down at the application in my hand. He's in Seattle? Is he? The voice sounded amused. Why don't you call and find out? I don't. Call him, they commanded. Right now. I want you to understand the full story before we finish this. My finger hovered over the buttons on the office phone. And if I don't? Then I come in right now and end this before you're ready. Your choice. I picked up the receiver with a trembling hand and dialed the Seattle number from Marcus's emergency contact form. It rang once. Twice. 3 times. Then a click and a voice. The number you have reached has been disconnected or is no longer in service. I hung up and picked up my cell phone. The number's dead. Of course it is. David Chen never moved to Seattle. He died 5 years ago, in 1991. Right here in this store. The office suddenly felt very small, very cold. What? Check the newspapers. October 23, 1991. There should be a copy in the filing cabinet somewhere. Kevin keeps everything. I yanked open the bottom drawer and found it, a folder labeled Incidents. Inside were newspaper clippings, incident reports, and insurance forms. I flipped through them until I found it. The headline read, Local college student killed in video store robbery. The article was brief, just a few paragraphs. David Chen, 23, had been working the closing shift at Video World when someone had broken in. There'd been a struggle. David had been stabbed. He died before the ambulance arrived. The perpetrator had fled the scene and was never caught. I stared at the grainy newsprint photo of David Chen, and suddenly I understood why Marcus had looked so familiar in the surveillance footage. He'd looked like his brother. The brother who'd been killed in this same store, probably in this same office, 5 years before Marcus ever started working here. Marcus came here because of David, I said into the phone. Very good. Marcus blamed himself, you see. He was the one who was supposed to cover David's shift that night, but he had a school thing, some stupid dance or game, I can't remember. David covered for him. And David died. So Marcus came to work here as what? Penance? He came here searching for answers. Trying to understand what had happened to his brother. Trying to feel close to him. The voice paused. But he never found what he was looking for. Because the truth was too painful. What truth? That David's death was meaningless. Random violence, a stupid robbery gone wrong, a life wasted for maybe $200 from the register. David died for nothing. And Marcus couldn't accept that. I thought about the tapes, about Marcus in that bathroom, terrified and alone. So you killed him? I freed him from the cycle. From the endless searching, the pointless grief, the futile hope that working in this cursed place would somehow bring him closer to his dead brother. I showed him that death doesn't have to be meaningless. That it can be intentional, ceremonial, transcendent. You're insane. Maybe. Or maybe I'm the only one who sees clearly. This store is cursed. It's a place where dreams go to die, where people waste their potential renting out other people's stories instead of living their own. David learned that. Marcus learned that. And now you're learning it too. I was gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles had gone white. I'm calling the police. Right now. No, you're not. Because I'm not finished with your education yet. Look at the bottom of the newspaper clipping. The very last paragraph. I scanned down to the end of the article. The final paragraph read, "Police are seeking information about a suspect seen leaving the scene. Witnesses describe a male, approximately 25 to 30 years old, wearing a dark jacket. Anyone with information should contact the Metro Police Department." "So?" I said. "They never caught him. Look at the byline." "Who wrote the article?" I checked the top of the clipping. "By Jennifer Marks, staff writer." "Jennifer Marks," the voice repeated. "She wrote about David's death. And do you know what's interesting? She wrote about other video store incidents too. It was her beat for a while, retail crime, workplace violence, that sort of thing. I don't understand what this has to do with." "She's dead too," they interrupted. "Killed herself in 1994. Jumped off a bridge. But before she died, she wrote a lot about video stores. About the isolation, the violence, the meaninglessness of it all. She understood, maybe better than anyone." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you need to see the pattern. David, Marcus, Jennifer, they all understood that this place, this industry, this whole system is built on emptiness. And they all tried to escape it, one way or another. I'm just helping people like you find a faster exit. I needed to get out of the office, out of the store." This conversation was spiraling into madness, and I was alone with a potential killer on the phone and possibly watching me from somewhere I couldn't see. "I have to go," I said. "Not yet. There's one more thing I need to show you. Go to the front counter. There's something in the drop box. I'm not playing this game anymore." "Yes, you are. Because if you don't check the drop box in the next 60 seconds, I'm going to call the fire alarm and lock you inside. And then we'll have a very different kind of conversation." I believed them. I didn't know why, maybe the confidence in their voice, maybe the evidence of how much planning had already gone into this, but I believed they could and would do exactly what they threatened. I walked out of the office and toward the front counter, my legs feeling like they belonged to someone else. The store was still empty, the promotional TV still playing its loop, everything normal except for the fact that a murderer was on the phone and I was following their instructions. The drop box was built into the wall next to the door. I lifted the interior panel and looked inside. Another black clamshell case. "Part 6. "There's no part 6, I said. "You said there were only 5 tapes. I lied. Or rather, I wasn't finished yet. This last one was filmed earlier today. While you were at home, planning your little investigation. Ice flooded my veins. You were at my apartment? I'm everywhere. Now play the tape. Let's see if you can figure out what comes next." I took the tape to the VCR behind the counter and loaded it. My hands were shaking badly enough that I almost dropped it twice. The screen flickered to life. The footage showed the exterior of my apartment building. The timestamp read that morning, around 11 a.m., right after I'd left to go talk to Kevin. The camera was positioned somewhere across the street, zoomed in on my front door. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the door opened, and my roommate came out, still in her scrubs from her hospital shift. She walked to her car, got in, and drove away. The camera stayed focused on the door. Waiting. After a few minutes, a figure appeared in frame. The same hooded person from the other tapes. They walked up to my door, tried the handle, locked, then pulled something from their pocket. Lock picks, I realized. They worked on the lock for maybe 30 seconds before the door swung open. They went inside. The camera angle didn't change. Just kept watching the door. Waiting. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then the figure emerged, closed the door behind them, and walked away. The footage continued for another minute or so before cutting to black. "You broke into my apartment," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I wanted to see how you lived. What kind of person you are when you're not at Video World. Do you know what I found?" I didn't answer. "Nothing," they said. "You're barely there." A few clothes, some textbooks, a laptop. You don't even have pictures on the walls. You live like you're just passing through, like you're waiting for your real life to start. Just like Marcus did. Just like everyone who works in these places does. Get to the point. The point is that you already know you don't belong there. You're studying film theory, dreaming about making movies, spending your nights in a place that rents out other people's stories. You're dying slowly, and you don't even realize it. I can save you from that. I can make your death mean something. By murdering me? By freeing you. And I've left you a gift to help you prepare. Check your apartment when you get home. You'll find it. The phone went dead. I stood there, holding the receiver, my mind racing. They'd been in my apartment. They'd touched my things. They'd left something for me to find. And they were telling me, with increasing clarity, that my time was running out. I had to make a choice. Right now. Option 1, call the police. Tell them everything, show them the tapes, ask for protection. Risk the caller making good on their threat to hurt someone else, but at least get help. Option 2, run. Get in my car, drive as far as I could, start over somewhere new. But the caller had promised to find me, and I believed them. Option 3, finish my shift. Go home. Find whatever they'd left in my apartment. Try to understand what they wanted, who they were, and find a way to stop them. It was a terrible plan. It was probably going to get me killed. But it was the only plan that gave me any chance of protecting the people I worked with and maybe, just maybe, surviving this. I hung up the phone and looked around the empty store. I still had 3 hours until closing. 3 hours to think, to prepare, to figure out what I was going to do. The rewinders hummed behind the counter, and I realized I still had my regular duties to complete. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. A killer was stalking me. I'd just watched footage of them breaking into my home, and I still needed to rewind return tapes and vacuum the floors. I grabbed the first tape from the return bin, The Shawshank Redemption, and loaded it into a rewinder. The mechanical whir was oddly comforting, a familiar sound in an increasingly surreal night. As the tape rewound, I tried to think through what I knew. The killer had worked at a video store years ago. They'd known David Chen, maybe had even been there the night he was killed. They'd watched Marcus work here, had planned his death carefully, had filmed it as some kind of evidence or trophy. And now they were focused on me. But why? What made me special? What made me worth freeing? Maybe nothing. Maybe I was just the employee who happened to be working when they decided it was time for their next victim. Or maybe there was something specific about me, some connection I hadn't discovered yet. I thought about David's death in 1991. A robbery gone wrong. The killer had never been caught. What if? My phone rang. Not the store phone. My cell phone, sitting on the counter where I'd left it. Unknown number. I answered. What now? I forgot to mention, the voice said, there are customers coming. 3 of them. They'll be there in about 5 minutes. Try to act normal. Sell them their movies. Pretend everything is fine. And don't tell them anything, or I'll know. How will you? They hung up. I looked out the front windows at the parking lot. It was nearly empty, just a few cars scattered across the spaces. But even as I watched, a minivan pulled in, parking near the door. A family got out, parents and a teenage kid, and walked toward the store. I straightened up, put on my customer service face, and prepared to act like everything was normal. Like I wasn't being stalked by a killer who'd broken into my apartment and was watching my every move. The door chimed as they entered. Hi there, I said, my voice only slightly shaky. Welcome to Video World. Let me know if you need help finding anything. The next 2 hours were surreal. Customers came and went, the family rented some comedies, a college student returned a stack of action movies, an elderly woman asked for recommendations for classic romances. I helped them all, made small talk, rang up their rentals, and acted like it was just another Sunday night shift. all while knowing that somewhere, somehow, the killer was watching. Every time the phone rang, I tensed. Every time the door chimed, I wondered if it would be them. Every shadow in the corner of my eye made me jump. But closing time came without incident. At 9 p.m., I flipped the sign to closed, locked the door, and began my closing duties for real. Rewind the returns, check. Match tapes to cases, check. Start the vacuum. The power went out. Again. Just like last night. The fluorescence died, the TV went dark, even the vacuum sputtered to silence. The only light came from the street lamps outside, casting long shadows through the windows. I stood frozen in the darkness, my heart hammering. This was it. This was when they would come for me. But seconds passed, then minutes, and nothing happened. The store remained silent except for my own breathing. I fumbled for my cell phone, using its tiny screen as a flashlight. The glow was barely enough to see by, but it was better than nothing. I made my way to the office, grabbed the tapes from the filing cabinet, and shoved them in my backpack. Then I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. As I reached for the deadbolt, I noticed something on the floor just inside the entrance. A piece of paper, white against the dark carpet. It hadn't been there before. I picked it up and held it under my phone's light. Written in block letters, it said, "Go home. Check your bedroom. We'll talk soon." I unlocked the door and ran. Part 5, the final night, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. The drive home was a blur. I kept checking my rearview mirror, expecting to see headlights following me, but the road behind me stayed empty. Rain had started again, light at first, then gradually building to a downpour that matched the panic pounding in my chest. My apartment building looked exactly as it had that morning, ordinary, safe, boring. I parked in my usual spot and sat for a moment, staring up at my dark windows on the second floor. My roommate's car wasn't in her spot, which meant she was still at work. I was going home to an empty apartment that a killer had broken into earlier today. The smart thing would be to call the police. Or check into a hotel. Or literally anything except walking into what might be a trap. But the note had said to check my bedroom. And despite every survival instinct screaming at me to run, I needed to know what they'd left for me. I grabbed my backpack, with the tapes and the kitchen knife still inside, and made my way up the exterior stairs to my apartment. The hallway was empty, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. My door looked untouched, no signs of forced entry. The killer had picked the lock and left no trace. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, my hand gripping the knife through the fabric of my backpack. The living room was exactly as I'd left it, laptop still on the coffee table, my notes about Video World scattered across the couch. Nothing seemed disturbed. I moved through the apartment room by room, turning on every light, checking every closet and corner. The bathroom was empty. The kitchen was empty. My roommate's bedroom was closed, and when I checked, everything looked normal. That left my bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, which was wrong. I always closed it completely. I pushed it open slowly, reaching inside to flip the light switch. My room looked mostly normal. Bed made, desk cluttered with textbooks, clothes hanging in the closet. But something was different. On my bed, arranged carefully on top of my pillow, was a VHS tape in a black clamshell case. And next to it was a Polaroid photograph. I approached slowly, my hand still on the knife. The tape had a label, "For You." The photograph showed me working at Video World, taken from outside the front windows. I was behind the counter, probably from earlier this week, helping a customer. I hadn't known anyone was watching, hadn't felt the camera's gaze. How long had they been photographing me? Following me? I set the photograph aside and picked up the tape. My hands were steadier now, the initial shock giving way to a cold kind of calm. I was past the point of fear. Now I just wanted answers. I carried the tape to the living room and loaded it into my roommate's VCR. We kept one hooked up to the TV for movie nights. The screen flickered to life, and for a moment, I saw nothing but static. Then the image resolved. It showed a video store, but not Video World. The layout was different, the shelves arranged in a different configuration, the color scheme more browns and oranges than Video World's purple and teal. The date stamp in the corner read, October 23, 1991. The night David Chin died. The camera was fixed in place, probably the store's security camera. The timestamp showed 9:47 p.m. The store appeared empty at first, just the aisles and the checkout counter visible in the frame. Then movement, someone entering from the back office. David Chin, wearing a Video World vest, carrying a clipboard. He moved down one of the aisles, checking inventory, making notes. Normal closing shift activities. The front door opened. A figure entered the store. Even through the grainy security footage, I could see they were wearing dark clothes and a hood pulled low. They didn't move like a normal customer. They moved with purpose, heading straight for the counter. David looked up from his clipboard, started to say something, probably a greeting, asking if he could help them. The hooded figure said something back. I wished desperately for audio. David set down his clipboard and moved behind the counter. Reaching for the register, maybe. Or the phone. The footage was too grainy to tell. The hooded figure lunged across the counter. What happened next was fast and brutal. David stumbled backward, his hands coming up defensively. The figure came around the counter. There was a struggle, things knocked off the counter, both of them grappling, moving in and out of the camera's view. Then David went down. The hooded figure stood over him for a moment, then reached into their pocket and pulled out something. I couldn't see what. They knelt down, out of frame, for several seconds. When they stood up again, they were holding David's Video World vest. They pulled off their hood, and I saw their face clearly for the first time. It was a young man, maybe 25, with dark hair and sharp features. He looked at the camera directly, as if he'd known it was there all along. Then he put on David's vest, walked to the register, and opened it. He took something out, not the money, something else. Papers, maybe. Then he turned and walked out of frame, leaving David's body on the floor behind the counter. The footage continued for several more minutes, showing the empty store, before cutting to black. When the screen flickered back to life, the scene had changed. Same camera angle, but now the timestamp showed 2 years later, 1993. Different lighting, different promotional materials on the walls, but definitely the same store. And standing behind the counter, wearing a Video World vest, was the same young man from the robbery footage. He was working there. The person who'd killed David Chin was working at the same video store, wearing a vest, helping customers, like nothing had happened. I watched in horrified fascination as the footage showed him going through normal work routines, renting tapes to customers, restocking shelves, organizing the counter. The timestamps jumped forward in increments, 1993, 1994, 1995. He worked there for years. Then the scene changed again. The timestamp read 1996, and now the camera was in a different location, handheld, shaky footage of the same young man. But he wasn't at a video store anymore. He was somewhere dark, cramped. A basement, maybe. He was talking to the camera, his lips moving without sound. The footage was too poor to read his lips, but his expression was intense, evangelical almost. He was explaining something, justifying something. Then he held up a photograph. Even through the poor quality, I could make it out, David Chin, smiling in his Video World vest. The young man pointed to the photograph, then to himself. His mouth moved, I freed him. The screen went black. I sat on my couch, staring at the dead TV screen, my mind struggling to process what I'd just seen. The killer had worked at the same store where he'd murdered David Chin. For years, he'd worked alongside people who had no idea what he'd done. And at some point, he'd convinced himself that murder was freedom, that death was a gift. And now he was fixated on Video World, on Marcus, on me. My phone rang. I answered it without checking the number. I knew who it would be. Did you watch it? The voice asked. Who are you? I demanded. What's your real name? Names don't matter. What matters is that you understand now. You see how it started, how I discovered the truth about these places. You murdered David Chen and then got a job at the same store? That's insane. I wanted to understand him. To see what he saw, to feel what he felt working there. And I learned that he was trapped, just like everyone else. Trapped in a cycle of meaningless work, renting out entertainment to people who use it to avoid living their own lives. I freed him from that. You killed him for money. I saw you take something from the register. I took his employment records. I needed them to apply for his job. The money didn't matter. I felt sick. And Marcus? Why did you target him? Marcus came looking for answers about his brother. He blamed himself for David's death, thought that working at Video World would help him understand, help him forgive himself. But all he found was the same emptiness, the same meaningless cycle. I watched him deteriorate over the months he worked there. I saw him dying inside, piece by piece. So I freed him too. You're a serial killer. You're not freeing anyone. You're just murdering people. Serial killer, they repeated, testing the words. I suppose that's technically accurate. But I prefer to think of myself as a liberator. I'm ending suffering. I'm making deaths matter instead of letting people waste away in places like Video World. What do you want from me? I want you to choose. Choose what? Whether you want to be freed now or later. Whether you want to go peacefully, like I offered Marcus, or whether you want to run and fight and make it harder for both of us. Your choice. I gripped the phone tighter. And if I choose to fight? Then I hunt you. And when I catch you, and I will catch you, it won't be gentle. It won't be peaceful. It'll be violent and terrifying, and you'll die knowing you made the wrong choice. Or I could go to the police right now. Show them everything you've left for me. You could. But you won't. Because you're curious about how this ends. Because part of you wants to understand what I'm offering. And because you know that if you run, I'll just find someone else at Video World to free. Maybe sweet Sarah with her terrible jokes. Maybe Kevin, who's wasted 15 years of his life on this career. Someone will die. The only question is whether it's you or them. My mind raced. They were right about one thing. I couldn't just run and let someone else become the target. But I also couldn't just accept death because a madman thought it would be meaningful. I needed a plan. How much time do I have? I asked. 3 days. That's how long I gave Marcus after I first contacted him. 3 days to make peace with it, to get his affairs in order. I'm offering you the same. 3 days to what? Write a will? Say goodbye to people? 3 days to understand. To see that what I'm offering is better than slowly dying in a dead-end job, wasting your potential, living a half-life. 3 days to choose peace. And if I don't choose peace? Then on the 4th day, I come for you anyway. But it won't be as kind. They hung up. I sat in the silence of my apartment, holding my dead phone, trying to think. 3 days. 72 hours to figure out who this person was, where they were, and how to stop them. Or 72 hours to run as far as I could and hope they never found me. Or 72 hours to accept my fate and die peacefully. None of those options were acceptable. I needed help. Real help. But who could I turn to? The police wouldn't believe me without more evidence. Kevin didn't even know Marcus had been killed. My roommate would think I was having a breakdown. Unless. I grabbed my laptop and opened it, navigating to the library website. If Jennifer Marks, the journalist who'd written about David's death, had killed herself in 1994, there would be records. Maybe articles she'd written about video store violence, pieces that had explored the same things the killer was obsessed with. I searched the newspaper archives for Jennifer Marks and found dozens of articles from the early 90s. Most were about retail crime, robberies, assaults, workplace violence. But there were a few that stood out. Think pieces about the video rental industry, about minimum wage workers, about the psychological toll of service work. One article from 1993 was titled "Trapped Behind the Counter: The Hidden Cost of Video Store Employment." I clicked on it and started reading. The article detailed interviews with video store employees from around the city, describing their experiences. Long hours, low pay, difficult customers, the repetitive nature of the work. Several employees talked about feeling trapped, like they were stuck in a dead-end job with no way out. And one employee, unnamed in the article, had said something that made my blood run cold. "Sometimes I feel like the only way out is if something drastic happens. Like the building burns down, or I get seriously hurt, or I just disappear." The article continued with Jennifer's analysis of how service jobs could create a sense of hopelessness, how workers could begin to feel like their lives had no meaning beyond the next shift, the next customer, the next paycheck. It was exactly the philosophy the killer had expressed. The same worldview, the same despair. Had Jennifer's article inspired him? Or had he inspired her? Had they known each other? I kept searching and found Jennifer's obituary from 1994. It was brief. Jennifer Marks, 28, had died by suicide. She was survived by her parents and a younger brother. A brother. I searched for more information about Jennifer's family and found an old social media profile that listed her brother's name, Michael Marks. Michael Marks. I searched for Michael Marks Video Store and got no results. I tried Michael Marks Ohio and got too many results to parse. I tried Michael Marks 1990s and found a few possibilities, but none that seemed connected to video stores. Dead end. Or maybe not. If Michael had worked at a video store under a different name, if he'd used David Chen's employment records to get a job, there might not be any public record of him working in the industry at all. But Video World's files might have something. Old employee records, security camera footage from years ago, something that could help me identify him. I checked the time, 11:47 p.m. The store would be closed, locked up, dark. But I had keys. I could get in, search through the old records, maybe find something that would help me figure out who I was dealing with. It was risky. If Michael was watching the store, and he seemed to always be watching, he'd know I was there. But I needed information, and the store was the only place I was likely to find it. I grabbed my backpack, made sure the kitchen knife was still inside, and headed for the door. The drive back to Video World felt like moving through a dream. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflective under the streetlights. The strip mall parking lot was completely empty when I pulled in, my headlights sweeping across the vacant spaces. I parked directly in front of the store and sat for a moment, scanning the area for any sign of Michael's car, any indication I wasn't alone. Nothing. I got out and walked to the door, my keys already in hand. The deadbolt turned smoothly, and I stepped inside. The store was dark except for the emergency exit lights, their red glow painting everything in ominous shadows. I didn't turn on the main lights. If Michael was watching, I didn't want to announce my presence. Instead, I pulled out my phone and used its screen as a flashlight, making my way toward the office. Kevin's filing cabinet was right where I'd left it. I pulled open the bottom drawer and started digging through the old files, looking for anything from the early 90s. Employee records, 1990 to 1995. Perfect. I pulled out the folder and spread the contents across Kevin's desk, searching for anything that might help. Applications, tax forms, termination notices. Dozens of names I didn't recognize, faces and photocopied pictures that meant nothing to me. And then I found it. An application from 1992, just a year after David's death. The name on the form was Thomas Davidson. The photograph showed a young man with dark hair and sharp features, the same face I'd seen in the surveillance footage from David's murder. Thomas Davidson. Not his real name, obviously. An alias he'd created using David Chen's stolen employment records. The application listed an address, a phone number, references. All probably fake. But there was one detail that caught my eye, Under previous employment, he'd listed another video store, Block Vision, in a different part of the city. If he'd worked at Block Vision before coming to Video World, there might be records there. Maybe even someone who remembered him. I pulled out my phone to photograph the application, and that's when I heard it. The front door chimed. Someone had just entered the store. I froze, my phone light still illuminating the papers on the desk. The chime echoed in the silent store, then faded to nothing. I held my breath, listening. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving through the aisles toward the back of the store. Toward the office. I looked around frantically for an escape route. The office had only one door, the one I'd come through. No windows, no other exit. I was trapped. The footsteps grew closer. I could see a shadow moving past the office door, backlit by the red emergency lights. I grabbed the kitchen knife from my backpack and held it in front of me, my hand shaking. The blade caught the light from my phone, glinting in the darkness. The footsteps stopped just outside the office. Then a voice, "I know you're in there. Michael. Or Thomas. Or whatever his real name was. Come out," he said. "Let's talk face to face. No more phone calls, no more games. Just you and me." I didn't move. Couldn't move. My legs had turned to lead. "I'm not going to hurt you," he continued. "Not tonight. I promised you 3 days, and I keep my promises. But we need to talk. We need to understand each other." "Stay away from me," I managed to say, my voice hoarse with fear. "I can't do that. You're too important to the plan now. You're the next one to be freed. I'm calling the police." "No, you're not. Because you want to know the truth. You want to understand why I'm doing this. And I'm the only one who can tell you." He was right, damn him. I did want to know. I needed to understand how someone could convince themselves that murder was mercy, that death was freedom. "Why David?" I asked. "Why did you kill him?" Silence for a moment. Then, "Come out and I'll tell you." Face to face. It was probably a trap. He probably had a weapon, probably planned to attack me the moment I showed myself. But I also might not get another chance to hear the truth. I took a deep breath, gripped the knife tighter, and stepped out of the office. He was standing in the main aisle, about 10 feet away, illuminated by the red emergency lights. He looked older than in the surveillance footage, late 30s, maybe 40 now. He was wearing dark clothes and a hood, just like in all the videos. And his hands were empty, visible at his sides. "Hello," he said quietly. "It's nice to finally meet you properly." "Stay back," I warned, holding up the knife. He didn't move. "I'm not going to hurt you tonight. I told you. 3 days. Why David?" I repeated. "Tell me the truth." He was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Then, "Because I loved him." That was not the answer I had been expecting. "What?" "I loved David Chen," he repeated. "We met in college. We were friends, then more than friends. But he couldn't accept it, couldn't accept himself. He broke things off, said it was wrong, said his family would never understand. And then he took this stupid job at a stupid video store, throwing his life away renting movies to strangers." My mind raced, trying to process this new information. "So you killed him because he broke up with you?" "I killed him because he was suffering. Because he hated himself for who he was, for what he felt. Because he was wasting his life in this meaningless job, hiding from his true self. I freed him from that suffering. That's not love. That's murder." "It's both," he said simply. "Love and death aren't opposites. Sometimes they're the same thing." "And Jennifer? Your sister? What was her excuse?" His expression darkened. Jennifer understood. She saw what these places do to people, how they trap workers in cycles of meaninglessness. She wrote about it, tried to warn people. But no one listened. And it destroyed her, the weight of that knowledge. So I freed her too. You killed your own sister? I gave her peace. Just like I gave David peace. Just like I gave Marcus peace. Just like I'll give you peace in 3 days. I'm not going to let you kill me. You don't have a choice. None of us have choices, not really. We're all trapped in systems we didn't create, playing roles we didn't choose. The only real choice is how we exit. Peacefully or violently. With meaning or without it. He took a step toward me. I raised the knife. Don't. I'm not going to touch you, he said. I just want to show you something. He reached into his jacket pocket slowly, keeping his other hand visible. I tensed, ready to run or fight or both. He pulled out another Polaroid photograph and held it up for me to see. It showed Marcus, smiling at the camera, wearing his Video World vest. A candid shot, taken sometime before he died. This was taken the day before I freed him, Michael said. Look at his eyes. You can see the pain there, the exhaustion. He was drowning, and he knew it. When I offered him a way out, he was grateful. He fought you. I saw the footage. At first, yes. Fear is natural. But in the end, he understood. In the end, he accepted it. You're delusional. Maybe. Or maybe I'm the only one who sees clearly. He tucked the photograph back into his pocket. 3 days. Use them wisely. Get your affairs in order. Say your goodbyes. Make peace with what's coming. I'm going to stop you, I said. No, you're not. Because you're curious. Because you want to understand. And by the time you do understand, it'll be too late. He turned and walked away, moving down the aisle toward the front door. I stood frozen, watching him go, my knife still raised uselessly. The door chimed as he left, and then I was alone in the dark store with the humming emergency lights and my racing heart. I waited 5 minutes before I moved, making sure he was really gone. Then I grabbed the Thomas Davidson application from the desk, shoved it in my backpack, and ran for my car. I needed to find Block Vision. I needed to find someone who remembered Thomas Davidson, who could tell me more about him. And I needed to do it before the 3 days were up. Because Michael was wrong about one thing, I did have a choice. And I was choosing to fight. Part 6, The Investigation, Day 2 to 8 a.m. 6 p.m. I didn't go back to my apartment that night. Instead, I drove to a 24-hour diner on the edge of town and sat in a corner booth with coffee I didn't drink and pancakes I couldn't eat, trying to process everything that had happened. Michael Marks. Thomas Davidson. A man who'd killed his first love, his own sister, and at least one more person that I knew of. A man who believed murder was mercy. A man who'd given me 3 days to live. By the time the sun came up, I'd made a plan. It wasn't a great plan, but it was something. First, I needed to find Block Vision, the video store Michael had listed on his fake application. If I was lucky, someone there might remember him, might know something useful. Second, I needed to gather evidence, real, concrete evidence that would convince the police this wasn't just some elaborate story I'd made up. And third, I needed to figure out where Michael was staying, where he was watching from, how he seemed to know my every move. I had just over 2 days to accomplish all of this. At 8 a.m., I called Video World and told Kevin I was sick. He sounded concerned, asked if I needed him to cover my shifts this week. I told him I'd let him know, that I just needed a day or two to rest. He bought it. Then I pulled out the Thomas Davidson application and looked at the address listed for Block Vision. The store had been on the east side of the city, in a neighborhood I didn't know well. I plugged the address into my phone's GPS and started driving. The location turned out to be a shuttered storefront in a rundown strip mall. A faded sign still hung above the door, Block Vision Video. Through the dirty windows, I could see empty shelves and scattered debris. The store had clearly been closed for years. Dead end. But the store next door, a hobby shop that looked like it had been there since the 70s, was open. I parked and went inside. The shop was cramped and cluttered, every surface covered with model trains, remote control cars, and dusty boxes of puzzles. An elderly man sat behind the counter, reading a newspaper through thick bifocals. "Help you?" he asked without looking up. "I'm looking for information about Block Vision, next door." "Do you know what happened to it?" "Closed in '95, he said, turning a page. "Owner retired, couldn't find anyone to buy it. Place sat empty for a while, then the landlord cleared it out." "Do you know what happened to the employees? Anyone who might have worked there in the early '90s? Now he looked up, his eyes sharp behind the thick lenses. "Why are you asking?" "I prepared a cover story. I'm writing a paper for school. About the video rental industry in the '90s, how it affected local businesses. I wanted to interview people who worked in the industry." He studied me for a moment, deciding whether to believe me. Then he shrugged. Most of the employees were college kids, came and went. But the manager, Carol, she worked there for years. Carol Peterson. She might talk to you, if you can find her. Do you know where she is? Last I heard, she was working at the library. Main branch downtown. Reference desk. I thanked him and headed back to my car. The main library was about 20 minutes away, in the heart of downtown. I made it there by 9:30 a.m., just as they were opening. The reference desk was easy to find, and behind it sat a woman in her 50s with graying hair and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Her name tag read Carol Peterson. "Excuse me," I said, approaching the desk. "Are you Carol Peterson? Did you used to work at Block Vision Video?" She looked up from her computer, surprised. "Yes, but that was a long time ago." "Why?" I gave her the same cover story about writing a paper. She seemed skeptical at first, but when I started asking specific questions about video store management and the industry in the '90s, she warmed up. We talked for about 10 minutes about the business side of running a video store, about customer preferences, about the rise of chain stores versus independents. Then I steered the conversation toward employees. "Do you remember anyone named Thomas Davidson? He would have worked there in the early '90s, maybe '92 or '93? Carol frowned, thinking. "Davidson, no, doesn't ring a bell. We had a lot of employees back then, though. Can you describe him?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the photograph from the application, the image of Michael Marks pretending to be Thomas Davidson. Her expression changed immediately. "Oh. Him. You remember him?" "I remember firing him," she said, her voice tight. "He only worked for us for about 6 months, but that was 6 months too long. He was strange. Intense. He made the other employees uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable how?" "He was obsessed with the job. Not in a good way, not like he loved movies or enjoyed helping customers. It was like he was studying it, analyzing every aspect of the work. He'd ask the weirdest questions, like how do you think this job changes people, or do you ever feel trapped here? He made the whole staff nervous." "Did anything specific happen that made you fire him?" Carol hesitated, then nodded. "There was an incident with a customer. A regular who came in every Friday to rent movies for his kids. Thomas, or whatever his real name was, cornered him one night, started going on about how the customer was wasting his life, how he was using movies to avoid living. The customer complained, said Thomas had followed him out to the parking lot and wouldn't leave him alone. What did you do?" "I fired him that night. Told him he was done, to turn in his vest and leave. He didn't argue, didn't even seem surprised. He just smiled at me and said, 'You're all trapped here, but someday you'll understand.'" She shuddered at the memory. It was creepy. "Did he ever come back? Did you ever see him again?" "No, thank God. I heard rumors later that he was working at another video store across town, but I never confirmed it." "Why are you asking about him? Did he do something?" I couldn't tell her the truth. "Not yet. Just thorough research. Thank you for your time." I left the library and sat in my car, processing what I'd learned. Michael had worked at Block Vision for 6 months before being fired for harassing customers. Then he'd moved to Video World, using David Chen's stolen identity. He'd worked there for years, watching, studying, waiting for the right moment to strike. But where was he now? Where was he living, watching from? I thought back to all the phone calls, all the surveillance footage. He'd said he was always watching Video World, which meant he had to be somewhere with a clear line of sight to the store. I drove back to the strip mall and parked across the street, studying the buildings around Video World. To the left was the subway and the vacant Radio Shack. To the right was a laundromat. Behind Video World was a drainage ditch and, beyond that, an apartment complex. The apartment complex. That had to be it. From the upper floors of those buildings, you'd have a perfect view of Video World's front entrance and parking lot. You could watch who came and went, see when the lights went on and off, monitor everything. I drove around to the apartment complex and parked in the visitor lot. The buildings were old but well-maintained, 3 stories tall with exterior hallways. I walked through the complex, looking for any apartments that faced Video World. Building C, 3rd floor. From the hallway, I could see directly across to the video store. I counted the doors. 6 apartments on this floor, all facing the right direction. One of them could be Michael's. But which one? I couldn't just knock on doors asking if a serial killer lived there. I needed to be smart about this. I pulled out my phone and called Video World. Sarah answered. "Hey, it's me," I said. "Listen, this is going to sound weird, but has anyone been calling the store asking for me? Like, in the last few days?" "No, I don't think so." "Why?" "Just checking." "Thanks." I hung up and thought. If Michael was watching from the apartments, he might have called the store from his landline at some point. And if he had, there might be a record of it. I needed to get back into Kevin's office, into the phone records. But first, I needed to narrow down which apartment was Michael's. I walked back down to the parking lot and started looking at the cars. I was searching for the dark sedan I'd seen in Video World's parking lot that first night, the one that had been there when everything started. I found it in the back row of the lot. A dark blue Oldsmobile, probably 15 years old, with a Video World parking permit sticker on the windshield, the kind employees got for free parking. I checked the apartment number written on the sticker, 3C4. Building C, 3rd floor, apartment 4. I'd found him. Now I just needed to decide what to do about it. Part 7, The Confrontation, Day 2 to 6 p.m. 11 p.m. I sat in my car for an hour, watching apartment 3C4, trying to work up the courage to do what I knew I had to do. The smart thing would be to call the police right now, tell them everything, show them the evidence I'd gathered. But I still didn't have proof that Michael had killed anyone. The tapes showed something happening to Marcus, but they didn't clearly show murder. The surveillance footage from David's death could be explained as a robbery. Everything else was circumstantial. I needed more. I needed something concrete, something undeniable. Which meant I needed to get into Michael's apartment. At 7 p.m., I watched him leave. He walked out of the building, got into the Oldsmobile, and drove away. I waited 10 minutes to make sure he wasn't coming back, then got out of my car. The apartment building's main door was locked, but I waited until a resident came out and slipped in behind them. The hallway smelled like old carpet and cooking odors. I took the stairs to the 3rd floor, my heart pounding. Apartment 3C4 was at the end of the hall. I stood in front of the door for a long moment, my hand hovering over the doorknob, knowing that what I was about to do was probably illegal and definitely dangerous. I tried the knob. Locked, of course. I pulled out my wallet and extracted a credit card, remembering a YouTube video I'd watched once about picking simple locks. It took me 5 tries, but finally I felt the lock give way. The door swung open. Michael's apartment was sparse, almost monastic. A mattress on the floor, a small desk, a chair. No TV, no decorations, nothing personal except for what was on the desk. I approached slowly, my hand on the kitchen knife in my pocket. The desk was covered with photographs. Dozens of them, all Polaroids, all showing the same thing, video world. Different angles, different times of day, different employees. I saw myself in several of them, working the counter, taking out the trash, walking to my car. There were older photos too. Marcus, smiling in his vest. Kevin organizing shelves. Sarah helping a customer. And even older, David Chen, young and alive, wearing his video world vest. Beneath the photographs were notebooks, filled with cramped handwriting. I picked one up and started reading. It was a journal, entries dated going back years. Michael had documented everything, his relationship with David, David's death, his decision to take David's identity and work at Video World. Page after page of observations about the employees, about the meaninglessness of the work, about his philosophy of freedom through death. One entry, dated 3 weeks ago, made my blood run cold. I've chosen the next one. They remind me of David, young, bright, wasting their potential in this place. They're studying film theory, dreaming of making movies while spending their nights renting out other people's stories. They don't realize they're dying slowly. But I can help them. I can free them, like I freed David, like I freed Marcus. 3 more weeks, and then I'll begin. 3 weeks ago. That's when each started planning my death. I kept reading, looking for anything that might serve as evidence. Names, dates, descriptions of the murders. There had to be something here I could take to the police. Then I found it. A locked box under the desk, small and metal. I picked it up and shook it, something rattled inside. I searched the desk for a key but couldn't find one. Finally, I used the kitchen knife to pry open the lock. Inside were 3 things, a VHS tape labeled Jennifer, a driver's license belonging to Marcus Chen, and a wedding ring. David's wedding ring? No, that didn't make sense. David and Michael had never married. Unless... I picked up the tape labeled Jennifer and realized what it must contain. Evidence of Michael killing his own sister. Real, undeniable proof. I pocketed the tape, the license, and the ring. Then I took photos of every page in the journal with my phone. This was evidence. This was what I needed. I was about to leave when I heard a noise in the hallway. Footsteps. Coming toward the apartment. I'd stayed too long. I looked around frantically for a place to hide. The closet was tiny but empty. I squeezed inside and pulled the door almost closed, leaving just a crack to see through. The apartment door opened, and Michael walked in. He stood in the doorway for a moment, his head tilted slightly, like he was sensing something wrong. Then he moved to the desk and looked down at the photographs and journals. I tried to put everything back exactly as I'd found it, but I must have missed something. Michael's hand moved across the desk, his fingers touching the journals, the photographs. Checking. Then he looked at the spot where the lockbox had been. His expression didn't change, but I saw his shoulders tense. He knew. He knew someone had been in his apartment, had taken his evidence. He turned and looked directly at the closet. "You can come out," he said quietly. "I know you're there." I didn't move, barely breathed. "I'm not angry," he continued. "If anything, I'm impressed. You're more resourceful than I thought. But you need to understand, taking those things won't change what's going to happen. It won't save you." I gripped the knife in my pocket. "You have 1 day left," he said. "1 more day to make peace with this. And then, tomorrow night, I'm coming for you. You can run, you can hide, you can go to the police, it won't matter. I'll find you. And when I do, it's going to hurt." He walked to the closet and opened the door. I lunged out, the knife aimed at his chest. He was ready for it. He sidestepped easily, grabbing my wrist and twisting until I dropped the knife. Then he shoved me backward, and I fell hard, hitting my head on the edge of the desk. Stars exploded in my vision. I tried to get up, but he was already on me, his knee on my chest, his hands around my throat. I gave you 3 days, he said, his face inches from mine. I was going to make it easy. But you couldn't just accept it, could you? You had to fight. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. My vision was starting to go dark. So here's what's going to happen, he continued, his voice calm despite the violence. I'm going to let you go. You're going to run, just like you wanted. And tomorrow night, when you think you're safe, when you think you've gotten away, that's when I'll find you. And it's going to be so much worse than what I had planned. He let go and stood up. I gasped for air, my throat burning. He picked up my knife and examined it. Keep this, he said, tossing it onto the floor next to me. You're going to need it. Then he walked out of the apartment, leaving me alone on the floor, coughing and shaking. I lay there for several minutes, waiting for my breathing to return to normal, for the panic to subside enough that I could think clearly. Then I grabbed the knife, grabbed my phone, and ran. I made it to my car and locked all the doors, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I needed to go to the police. Right now. I had evidence, the tape, the license, the ring, the photos of the journal. I had enough to convince them this was real. I drove straight to the police station and stumbled through the front entrance, probably looking half crazed. The officer at the desk took one look at me and called for help. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in an interview room with 2 detectives, a middle-aged woman named Rodriguez and a younger man named Park, trying to explain everything that had happened. I showed them the tapes. I showed them the photos of Michael's journal. I showed them Marcus's driver's license and the wedding ring. I told them about David Chen's murder, about Marcus's disappearance, about Jennifer Marks's suicide that might not have been a suicide at all. They listened. They took notes. They asked questions. And then Detective Rodriguez said the words I'd been dreading, "This is all very concerning, but we need to verify some of this before we can take action." The surveillance footage from 1991 is old evidence that was never connected to a suspect. The journal entries could be fiction. The driver's license could have been lost or stolen. We need more to get a warrant for Mr. Marks's apartment. But I was just there, I said. I saw everything. Which you obtained through an illegal search, Detective Park interjected. Anything you found there might not be admissible in court. We need to do this by the book. He's going to kill me tomorrow night. He told me he's coming for me. Which is why we're going to provide protection, Rodriguez said. We'll have an officer parked outside your apartment. If he shows up, we'll arrest him for harassment and threatening behavior. That'll give us time to build a real case. It wasn't enough. A patrol car outside my apartment wouldn't stop Michael. He was too smart, too patient. He'd wait for the right moment, and then. But I had no other options. I gave them my address, and they promised to have someone there within the hour. I left the station feeling hollow. I'd done everything I could think of, and it still might not be enough. I couldn't go back to my apartment, even with police protection, it felt too exposed. Instead, I checked into a motel on the outskirts of town, paying cash and using a fake name. I called my roommate and told her I was staying with a friend for a few days, that she should stay somewhere else too, just to be safe. Then I sat on the motel bed and waited for tomorrow night. Part 8, the final shift, day 3 to 6 p.m. midnight. I spent the day in the motel room, jumping at every sound, checking the parking lot every few minutes for signs of the dark blue Oldsmobile. The police called around noon to say they'd checked Michael's apartment, but he wasn't there. They posted someone to watch the building, but so far, no sign of him. He was out there somewhere. Watching. Waiting. At 4 p.m., Kevin called my cell phone. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hey," he said, sounding worried. "I know you're sick, but I really need you tonight. Tom's still out, Sarah has a family emergency, and I can't cover the closing shift. Is there any way?" "No," I said immediately. "I can't. I'm really sick, Kevin. Food poisoning or something. I'll pay you double. Please. It's just until 9. Then you can go home and rest. Going to Video World tonight was the worst idea imaginable. It was exactly what Michael would expect, exactly what he'd be waiting for. Which was why, perversely, it might actually work. If I went to Video World for a shift, if I acted normal, if I pretended everything was fine, maybe I could draw Michael out. Maybe with the police knowing where I'd be, with them ready to respond, we could end this tonight. Okay, I heard myself say. I'll be there at 6. Thank you. Seriously, you're a lifesaver. A lifesaver. The irony wasn't lost on me. I called Detective Rodriguez and told her about the shift. She wasn't happy about it, thought it was too risky. But when I explained that this might be our best chance to catch Michael, she agreed to have officers nearby, ready to move in if anything happened. Don't try to be a hero, she warned me. If you see him, if he contacts you, you call us immediately. Don't engage with him. I agreed, even though we both knew I was already engaged. This was happening whether I wanted it to or not. I arrived at Video World at 5:55 p.m. The parking lot was moderately full. Sunday evening was usually busy with people returning weekend rentals and picking up movies for the week ahead. Everything looked normal, safe, mundane. Kevin was behind the counter, looking relieved when he saw me. You look terrible, he said. Are you sure you're okay to work? I'll manage. What do you need me to do? Just cover the counter until 9. I'll handle restocking and everything else. You just ring people up and answer the phone. Simple enough. I could do that. Kevin left at 7, and I was alone in the store with a handful of customers browsing the aisles. I kept my phone in my pocket, Detective Rodriguez's number on speed dial. I watched the doors, the windows, the shadows between the shelves. Nothing. By 8 p.m., the store had emptied out. The last few customers paid for their rentals and left, and I was alone. The phone rang. I picked it up slowly. Video World. Final shift, Michael's voice said. Appropriate, don't you think? The police know about you. They're watching this store right now. Are they? I don't see anyone. But then again, I'm very good at watching without being seen. I looked out the windows at the parking lot. 2 cars sat in the spaces, mine and one other, probably belonging to someone at the subway. No police cruiser that I could see, but Rodriguez had said they'd be nearby, watching. What do you want, Michael? I want to finish this. Tonight. No more delays, no more games. Just you and me and the freedom I've been promising you. I'm not interested in your version of freedom. You went to the police, he said. You showed them the evidence. And they didn't believe you, did they? Oh, they took your statement, they said they'd investigate. But deep down, you know they think you're crazy. Paranoid. Making it all up. They're taking it seriously. They're humoring you. Giving you a patrol car to make you feel safe. But they're not going to stop me. No one is going to stop me. We'll see about that. Yes, he agreed. We will. Check the drop box. There's one more tape. The last one. Watch it, and then we'll talk. He hung up. I stood there, holding the phone, knowing I shouldn't check the drop box, knowing it was exactly what he wanted me to do. But I also knew I would do it anyway. I had to know what was on that final tape. I walked to the drop box and opened it. Inside was a black clamshell case labeled The End. I took it to the VCR and loaded it, my hand steady now. I'd gone past fear into a strange kind of calm. This was happening. This was real. And I was going to face it. The tape began. It showed the interior of Video World, this Video World, my store, from the same camera angle as the very first tape. The timestamp showed tonight's date, but a time from earlier in the day, 2 p.m., when the store would have been closed for the brief window between the morning and afternoon shifts. The store was empty. Then the office door opened, and Michael walked out. He was carrying something. A can of gasoline. My heart stopped. I watched as he moved methodically through the store, pouring gasoline along the aisles, over the carpets, across the counter, saturating everything. When the can was empty, he set it down near the door and pulled out a box of matches. He looked up at the camera, looked directly at me, watching this tape, and smiled. Then he struck a match and dropped it. The tape went to static just as the flames caught. I ejected the tape and ran to the office, grabbing the phone to call 911. But before I could dial, I smelled it. Gasoline. Fresh gasoline, somewhere in the store. He hadn't just filmed this earlier. He was here. Right now. Detective Rodriguez, I said into my cell phone, my voice shaking. He's here. He's in the store. Send help now. The lights went out. All of them, just like before. The fluorescents, the promotional TV, everything. The store plunged into darkness. And from somewhere in the aisles, I heard a match strike. The tiny flame illuminated Michael's face for just a second before he dropped it onto the carpet. The gasoline caught instantly, flames racing across the floor, spreading faster than seemed possible. Within seconds, the entire center aisle was ablaze. I ran for the front door, but Michael was faster. He appeared out of the smoke and flames, blocking my path. This is how it ends, he said, his voice calm despite the inferno growing around us. Not peaceful. Not gentle. You chose to fight, so we burn together. Your death will mean something, even if it's not what I originally planned. You're insane. Maybe. But you'll still be free. He lunged at me, and I barely dodged, stumbling backward into the horror section. The flames were spreading rapidly, consuming the old carpets and cardboard displays. Smoke was filling the air, making it hard to breathe, hard to see. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a metal bookend from one of the shelves, and swung it at Michael's head. It connected with a solid thunk, and he staggered backward. I ran past him, heading for the back of the store. There had to be another exit, a back door, something. The smoke was getting thicker, and the heat was intense. I could hear the roar of the flames behind me, getting closer. The back hallway. The bathrooms. And beyond them, there, a door marked emergency exit. I slammed into it, and it swung open into the cool night air. I stumbled out into the alley behind the store, gasping for breath. Behind me, I could see flames visible through the windows, could hear the roar as the fire consumed Video World. And then Michael came through the emergency exit, his clothes singed, his face twisted with rage. You can't run from this, he said. You can't run from me. I backed away, looking for anything I could use as a weapon. My hand closed around a piece of broken concrete from the crumbling alley pavement. Michael advanced, and I threw the concrete. It hit him in the shoulder, barely slowing him down. Then, suddenly, lights, bright, blinding. Police cars pouring into the alley from both ends, sirens wailing. Detectives Rodriguez and Park were out of their vehicles, weapons drawn. Police! Get on the ground! Michael stopped, his eyes moving from me to the police to the burning building. For a moment, I thought he might run, might fight, might do something desperate. Instead, he smiled. She's free now, he said quietly. They all are. And someday, you will be too. Then he turned and ran back into the burning building. No! Rodriguez shouted, but it was too late. Michael disappeared into the smoke and flames. An officer grabbed me and pulled me away as the firefighters arrived, their truck screaming into the parking lot. I watched as they battled the blaze, as the store I'd worked in for 9 months slowly collapsed in on itself. They never found Michael's body in the rubble. The fire had been too intense, too complete. But they found his apartment later, found the rest of his journals, found evidence linking him to David's murder, to Jennifer's death, to Marcus's disappearance. They found graves, 3 of them, in a wooded area outside the city. Marcus was there. Jennifer was there. And the third was empty, waiting. Waiting for me. Epilogue, 6 months later. I transferred to the university in the spring semester. Changed my major from film theory to psychology. Started seeing a therapist twice a week to deal with the nightmares, the flashbacks, the persistent feeling that someone was watching me. Video World never reopened. The insurance company investigated whether it was arson, but without a body or a living suspect, the case eventually went cold. Kevin got a job managing a different video store across town. Sarah transferred to a location in another state. The rest of the staff scattered. Sometimes I think about what Michael said, about freedom and meaning and the trap of meaningless work. I think about David and Marcus and Jennifer, about how they all ended up dead because one person convinced himself that murder was mercy. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if he really died in that fire. Or if he's still out there, watching some other video store, choosing his next victim, preparing to offer them the same terrible gift he offered me. I tell myself it doesn't matter. That he's gone, that I'm safe, that I survived. But then I see a dark car in a parking lot, or I notice someone watching me in a crowd, or I get a phone call from an unknown number that goes to silence when I answer. And I remember his final words, "Someday, you will be too. Free." That's when I realize, even though I survived, even though I escaped, part of me will always be trapped in that burning store, running from a killer who believed death was freedom. And maybe he was right about one thing. Maybe we're all dying slowly, one shift at a time. Some of us just burn faster than others. The end.